All right, let's dive into something that, on the surface, looks like a pretty standard government document. We're talking about a presidential executive order, but when you start to peel back the layers, you find this fascinating story about just how messy and complicated making policy can be in the real world. So let's get into it.
So we're looking at Executive Order 14231. And like a lot of these official documents, the title makes you think one thing, but what it's actually for turns out to be something completely different. It's a real head-scratcher.
Okay, here it is. The full formal title. Wow, that sounds incredibly serious, doesn't it? I mean, it immediately makes you think about national security, border control, stopping illegal drugs. It paints this very clear, very specific picture.
But is that what this order is truly trying to fix? Because, once you actually open it up and start reading the text, a completely different story starts to unfold.
Yeah, you heard me right. This super serious-sounding order about illicit drugs is, well, it's mostly about exempting Canadian auto parts from taxes and slashing the tariff on something called potash, which is a key ingredient in fertilizer. So how on earth do you get from a national security crisis to car parts? That's the puzzle we're going to solve today.
To really get what this amendment is doing, we have to rewind the tape a little bit. We need to look at the original policy that this one was created to fix. Think of it like the prequel to our story.
It all started about a month before, with a different order, Executive Order 14193. This was the first domino. It set up these really broad tariffs, which are essentially just taxes on imported stuff on a whole range of goods coming into the U.S. from Canada.
And the stated purpose of that original order was exactly what the title said: use economic pressure as a tool to deal with the national security problem. The logic, I guess, was if you make things economically painful enough, you can force some action on the drug issue. But here's the thing with big sweeping policies. They almost always have consequences you just don't see coming.
And that is exactly what happened here. The big, wide net that the first order cast accidentally caught something that was never the intended target, and it created a massive problem for a really vital American industry.
Now, what's really interesting here is that the government basically spells out the problem in the text of the new order. This quote right here from Section 1, it sets the stakes perfectly. It's them saying, hey, the auto industry is absolutely critical, not just for jobs, but for the whole country's economic and national security.
So why was this critical industry suddenly in trouble? Well, it's because there really is no hard line between the American and Canadian auto industries. For decades, they've operated as one giant, deeply connected system where parts and pieces are constantly flowing back and forth across the border. And this slide kind of shows you how it works. Let's say a factory in Michigan makes some small components. Then they ship them up to a plant in Ontario, Canada, to be built into something bigger, like a transmission. That finished transmission then gets shipped back to a factory in, say, Ohio to be put into a car. Under that original broad tariff, that single part could get hit with a tax multiple times. That would send costs through the roof for American companies, and eventually, for you, the consumer. So here's the bottom line. A policy that was aimed at national security was unintentionally crippling the very U.S. workers and companies it was supposed to protect. It just jammed up the gears of this incredibly efficient cross-border system. So that created a pretty urgent need for a fix. Not to get rid of the whole policy, but to make a really precise, almost surgical adjustment to correct the damage that was being done.
And that brings us right back to our star player today, Executive Order 14231. It was signed on March 6th, and its entire purpose was to be that targeted fix, an amendment designed to relieve the pressure on the auto industry, and as we'll see, another key sector too.
So what did the order actually change? Well, this breaks it down pretty clearly. Before this order, all those Canadian auto parts we were just talking about, they were getting hammered with tariffs. After, totally exempt. Boom, problem solved for the auto industry. And at the same time, the order also tackles another economic headache. The tariff on Canadian potash, that fertilizer stuff, was dramatically slashed from a whopping 25% all the way down to 10%.
This chart really puts that potash tariff cut into perspective. I mean, you can see this was not a small tweak. This was a massive course correction, a more than 60% cut. And that was probably aimed at directly helping American farmers by lowering their costs for essential fertilizer.
So what does this all mean when we zoom out? This whole episode, the big policy, the painful side effect, and then the quick, targeted fix, it's really a masterclass in the constant tightrope walk of modern government. It's about trying to solve one problem without creating three more. So, what should we really take away from all this? Well, first, it's a powerful reminder that big, sweeping policies can create ripple effects that nobody saw coming. Second, it just highlights how deeply intertwined the North American economy really is. And finally, it shows the tough reality of making policy. It's a constant process of tweaking and recalibrating, of balancing competing and equally important priorities, like pitting a national security goal against the economic well-being of your own country's workers.
And this whole story really leaves us with a final, crucial question to think about. In a world this complex and interconnected, how can any government really balance a policy's big stated goals with all the messy, real-world consequences that are pretty much guaranteed to pop up? It's a central challenge of making policy that actually works, and definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for joining us.